In the deep, cold woods, a hunger beyond death stalks its prey. 3 relentless tales of terror and despair await you. Enter a realm where the cursed Wendigo roams unchecked, and hope is lost in the endless night. In a far-off land, a man named John lived near a vast forest that was cold and harsh. For years, the people in his town whispered of a curse, a creature known as the Wendigo. They said it was once a man who had given in to greed, and now it roamed the forest with a hunger that could never be satisfied. One bitter winter day, John set out to gather wood in the forest. The land was bleak, and the trees stood bare against a gray sky. As John walked deeper into the frozen forest, he noticed strange, deep footprints in the snow. The prints were large, with crooked shapes that sent a chill down his spine. John's heart filled with fear as he recalled the old tales of the Wendigo. Even though he tried to dismiss the warnings, every step reminded him that the curse might be real. John soon came upon a wide clearing in the forest. Here, the snow lay undisturbed except for the deep tracks that led away from him. In the middle of the clearing, a distant figure moved slowly. It was tall, with thin limbs and a gaunt body that seemed too sharp for a man. John's pulse raced as he realized that the creature from the stories was now before him. The figure moved as if it was searching for something, its presence dark and relentless. John turned to run, but the frozen forest had a way of trapping its wanderers. The footprints grew closer, marking a path that he could not escape. The weight of despair settled over him as he realized that the creature was following. John's thoughts turned to his warm home and the safety he once knew, but the cursed hunger of the Wendigo was a force that cared little for hope. In his desperate search for refuge, John found a small cabin hidden among the trees. He knocked on its door, seeking shelter from the relentless cold and his pounding fear. An old man answered, his eyes grave as he listened to John's trembling words. The old man spoke quietly of the Wendigo's curse and warned that the forest never forgave those who dared to disturb its dark secret. Despite the offer of a brief rest, John could feel that the creature would not be kept at bay for long. That night, John lay on a simple wooden bed, his mind filled with visions of the creature's relentless hunger. He recalled every whispered warning from his childhood, each one a stark reminder that the forest was not a place of comfort. As the hours passed, the feeling of dread only deepened. In his sleep, John dreamt of endless white expanses and a shadow with burning eyes stalking him through the frozen wasteland. At first light, John left the cabin with a heavy heart, determined to find his way home. The old man's words echoed in his ears. The forest was a trap, and the Wendigo would always hunger for more. With every step, John felt the creature's unseen gaze, and the footprints in the snow seemed to lead him into an inescapable maze. His pace quickened as the realization set in that his fate might already be sealed. John's strength began to wane as the forest stretched on, its icy grip unyielding. He stumbled on frozen ground, his breath coming in weak bursts. The creature's presence grew ever closer, a silent force that seemed to pull the very life from the air. At last, in a desolate clearing under a bleak sky, John collapsed onto the hard, frozen earth. In that final moment, as his strength ebbed away, John saw the Wendigo approach. Its eyes burned with a dark hunger that spoke of endless despair. There was no escape from the ancient curse. As the creature reached out with skeletal fingers, John's final thought was filled with regret, a hope that he had never strayed into the cursed forest. The frozen woods kept his secret, and the Wendigo's hunger was fed once more. Mark lived in a small town by a thick forest that held a dark secret. For generations, the people whispered about a creature known as the Wendigo, a being cursed by an unending hunger. Though the town appeared calm by day, the deep woods at its edge were a place of unspeakable terror. Mark, curious and bold, decided one night that he would seek the truth behind these stories. Late one evening, Mark stepped into the forest. The path ahead was silent and heavy, and his heart beat fast with each step. The town's warnings echoed in his mind, yet he pressed forward. Soon, he discovered large, uneven footprints pressed into the soft earth. They were not made by any common animal, and they led deeper into the forest. Mark's fear grew with each step as he realized that the ancient curse might be more than just a story. Mark moved carefully along the trail, noting every mark and every sign. He reached an open space where the earth was soft from recent snow. In this clearing, a broken tree stump lay abandoned, and fresh prints led away from it. Mark crouched to examine them. The tracks were deep and desperate, like those made by a creature driven by an insatiable need. He remembered the tales of the Wendigo and felt his heart sink. Rising slowly, Mark decided to follow the trail. The forest felt as if it were closing in around him. The silence was thick with the promise of danger, and Mark could not shake the feeling that he was being watched. He walked on, every step heavy with dread, until he reached a part of the forest that seemed untouched by time. The trees stood silent and grim, and the path disappeared into a tangle of shadows. Without warning, Mark saw a tall, gaunt figure moving slowly among the trees. The creature's thin limbs and hollow eyes sent a wave of terror through him. This was the Wendigo, and Mark knew that the legends were real. He turned to run, but the forest had already claimed him in its vast, endless grip. The creature's presence was relentless, and it pursued him through the tangled woods. Mark's efforts to escape grew desperate. He ran blindly, not knowing where the path would lead. The forest seemed to conspire against him, its cold, uncaring vastness swallowing each step he took. His lungs burned with the effort, and his legs grew weak under the strain. The Wendigo followed close behind, its dark hunger driving it forward without pause. At last, Mark stumbled to a stop on a patch of soft ground. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his vision blurred with exhaustion. The Wendigo loomed near, its eyes filled with a hunger that no mortal could ever hope to satisfy. Mark tried to crawl away, but his body was too weak to move. The creature advanced slowly, each step a promise of doom. In the cold grip of the forest, Mark lay defeated. The Wendigo's skeletal hand reached out, and Mark felt the chill of inevitable despair. He recalled the quiet warnings of his childhood and the many souls lost to the endless hunger. In that final moment, Mark understood that some curses are unbreakable, and that hope fades in the face of relentless darkness. The forest reclaimed him, and his cry was lost in the heavy silence. Sarah was a young woman who lived near a vast wilderness, known for its dark legends. For as long as she could remember, her elders had warned of the Wendigo, a creature cursed with endless hunger and a heart turned cold by greed. Sarah was curious about the old stories and decided one fateful night to venture deep into the forest to learn the truth for herself. One cold evening, Sarah left her small home and entered the dense woods. The path was hard and unforgiving, and each step weighed heavily on her. The silence of the forest was deep, and the ancient curse of the Wendigo seemed to lie in wait. Sarah moved slowly, her mind filled with both dread and determination. She had heard that the creature was once human, but its hunger had twisted it into something unrecognizable. As Sarah journeyed deeper, she began to notice marks along the path. There were deep gouges in the bark of trees and large prints pressed into the soft earth. These signs told a story of a creature that had passed by long before, leaving a trail of despair in its wake. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized that the Wendigo might be near. After a long while, Sarah reached an open area where a single ancient tree stood alone. Near the tree were footprints that were far too large to belong to any animal she had ever seen. The marks were raw and recent, speaking of a desperate hunger that could not be sated. Sarah felt a deep, growing fear as she realized that the creature was close and that its hunger was not something that could be ignored. The forest around her seemed to grow darker and colder. Sarah pressed forward, her steps slow and hesitant. It was then that she saw a figure moving between the trees, a tall, gaunt form that appeared almost as a shadow. The figure drew nearer, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was the Wendigo. The creature's eyes were empty and dark, filled with a hunger that promised nothing but despair. Sarah knew she could not run, for the forest was vast and her energy was nearly spent. She stood frozen, the weight of the ancient curse pressing down on her. The Wendigo advanced slowly, each movement deliberate and filled with a cold, unyielding purpose. Sarah felt that her fate was sealed, that there was no escape from the dark hunger that drove the creature. In her final moments, Sarah thought of the countless souls lost to the curse of the Wendigo. The forest was a place where hope was swallowed and dreams turned to dust. The The creature reached out, its long, twisted fingers drawing closer, as if to claim what was left of her spirit. There was no heroism in her struggle, only the stark realization that some curses remain unbroken and unforgiving. As the Wendigo's form merged with the darkness, Sarah's eyes closed. The endless night claimed her, leaving behind only the cold memory of a soul lost in a land of despair. The cursed forest kept its secret, and the hunger of the Wendigo continued its relentless search for the next victim. There was no happy ending for Sarah, only the dark legacy of a hunger that would never be satisfied. As the night gives way to the cold silence of dawn, the legacy of the Wendigo endures. 3 grim tales of terror and despair remind us that some curses offer no hope, only endless hunger and inevitable loss. Thank you for joining this journey into darkness. Remember, in the deep, cold woods, hope is but a fleeting shadow.